Thank you. Boa tarde. Tudo bem? Yes, okay. So, my Portuguese is a little bit poor, so please use the headsets. I lived in America for 17 years. I'm originally from Germany, but if you speak to Americans, you have to speak very fast, or they get bored, right? So, sometimes I speak a little bit too quick. So, first I want to thank Rodrigo for inviting me, and Marisa for the great organization. Thank you, Marisa. It's a great pleasure to be here. I've been coming to Brazil for almost 25 years. And you know, when I first came, I heard the saying from people that Brazil is the future. That was 25 years ago. Every time I come back, people tell me Brazil is the future. But the future hasn't really arrived yet in Brazil. Right? And maybe there is a way that it will arrive now much quicker than we thought. You know, it's interesting to see that the future, even 10 years ago, the future was kind of science fiction. And now the future is here. Science fiction is here. We have self-driving cars. We have free phone calls on WhatsApp. We have 80 million songs on Spotify for 20 reals, right? I mean, the future is arriving very, very quickly, and before you know it, it's here. So I'm going to speak to you a little bit broader terms. Also, I will touch a little bit on shopping and groceries and food and all these good topics. So last year in the COVID time, I went to Lanzarote, the Canary Islands, which is one of my favorite places because it has more or less desert. Right? It's a place where you come to connect to nature. And this was in the middle of COVID. And everybody was telling me that the future is bad. There's COVID, there's climate change, there's robots. Right? So I made this film called The Good Future, or Bom Futuro. You can watch it at thegoodfuturefilm.com, it's free, also in Portuguese subtitles if you want. But then, when I made the movie, I showed it to my children. One is 25 and one is 33. And they said, you got it wrong. The future isn't good. Everything that is going wrong, it could not be fixed. Right? The future is going to be bad, right? And, example, global warming. In Europe, the hottest summer ever. In Brazil, droughts, fire, right? And then people are saying, you know, we're kind of at the point where the future could be really interesting, but most of the time it's going to be bad, right? It's basically this kind of divergence of what's happening with the future. And then we look at some statistics, like here. You'll see here India and Brazil in one bucket here. A lot of kids between 16 and 25, young people, are saying that the future is going to be lousy. I don't know how that is in Brazil, but here's a summary, right? People have failed, future is frightening. Yeah, it's a long list. Right? And especially younger people don't feel that good about the future, which makes me wonder, are we heading into dystopia? Climate change, automation, artificial intelligence, robots, is this kind of what we have today, what the future will bring? And when we look in this direction, I think it's quite clear one of the fears of people is that the robots will come and take our work. You may have seen in some films around the world the topic of automation. And automation is a big deal in your business, right? Everything is becoming automated, the checkout, the back end, right? So is that going to be the truth? But I'm here to tell you a good message. O futuro es melhor, better than we think. The future actually has great potential, but what we see about the future says the opposite. If you watch movies, it always ends badly for us. I don't know if you watched any movies on Netflix lately, but basically the robots come, they take our jobs, and then they take our body to harvest for energy. Right? That's kind of the story of the future. So I think we have to rethink this. Kevin Kelly, the famous futurist who started Wired magazine, he says we should be optimistic. And I agree with him. And he talks about protopia, not utopia, which is like can't really be gotten. That's heaven, right? Or dystopia, protopia, a slow progress towards the future. Right? And he says the main reason, and I agree with him on this, the main reason is not because we have less problems, but we have a lot more capacity to solve them. In fact, a lot of practical problems, water, food, climate, disease, we are on the way to solving. It's hard to imagine, right? I mean, for example, right down the street, there's the Hadron Collider right here in Campinas, right? Which is working on creating one piece of the puzzle for nuclear fusion, for unlimited energy. People are saying roughly in 10, 15 years, if it goes on like it is, we can have nuclear fusion, which is the opposite of fission, right? Very low output of pollution, very high energy, solving our energy problem. So I'll give you some examples just to see the numbers here, right? Look at this chart. All of the serious innovation, robotics, genome sequencing, energy storage, have happened in the last 20 years. The world is exploding with innovation. And you can see that here in Brazil. Right? You can see how these things are changing our society. And then we have this. This is climate technology innovation. I think this is where Brazil could take leadership. Climate technology will be the next 100 unicorns. The biggest companies in the world will come from here. Battery technology, fuel cells, agriculture software, all of the things that make the world more efficient. To make the world green again, we don't just have to switch from fossil fuel, we have to also be more efficient and cut down on pollution. So this curve is very hopeful. This one is interesting. Brazilians, you see the green bar here, about 20% answered that because of the COVID crisis, they're looking to do better in the future, to have a wider view of the world, right? More purpose. And that is changing how people behave. The previous speaker, Sajay, I think is his name, he already mentioned what's happening with millennials. But let's make no mistake about this, right? We are at a fork in the road moment. The next 10 years will bring more change than the previous 100 years. That sounds crazy, right? 100 years, the internet, the nuclear bomb, But now, we're making very big decisions. And they could be good, or they could be bad, but they have potential to be all good. This is what we need here, right? The future mindset. I would like all of you to go home tonight and get some ears to listen to the future. Because here's the problem, right? We used to say, we operate with, we're already working more than we should. We don't have time for the future. In Germany, where I was born, people tell me that when you look at the future, you waste time on the present. Right? Nothing could be further from the truth. You should spend at least 1 hour a day in the future. And I'm not talking about 50 years, I'm talking about 5 or 10 years, right? To understand what's coming. Because the future is exponential. If you haven't noticed, our world is leaping into the future. This isn't a gradual thing. Right? Now, my kids are going to live to be 100 years old, like the average people that are 30 now. If you're 5 years old today, the chances are that you will become 120 years old are very high. I mean, can you imagine what that will do, right? That's 60 years on the cruise ship, from 60 to 1. No, just kidding. Don't forget the cruise ship. But it's living much longer than we ever thought was possible. So here, quite simply put, this is a topic, right? How do we build the good future? So there's 3 things that are very important for you in the supermarket business and in life. They happen to be the same here, right? That are coming together. Okay, I'll share them with you and then I'll give you some details. First, everything is going digital. Right? Food, agriculture, smart agriculture, water systems, climate change systems, right? Money. It's very likely that we're going to see a digital currency run by the state of Brazil, what's called a central bank digital currency. Not Bitcoin, right? but basically a digital version. There's already 10 different countries who have a digital currency. The next one is decarbonization. I know this may not be a very popular topic in Brazil, but the world is going green at a fast rate. Right? Our future is not in fossil fuel, it's in the green economy. And everybody around the world is starting to jump the ship, right? To divest from oil and gas, to invest in decarbonization. And this is a big topic I'll talk more about later. Reformation. That's kind of a good word, it's a good fit with the others, but it means that we're reforming our society, our economy, to see what we want. Bobby Kennedy said, 1968, GDP measures everything except that which makes our life worthwhile. Right? The old definition of prosperity is ending. And we looked at COVID, we're saying, okay, doesn't really help me if I'm richer than those having COVID. Everybody gets COVID. Right? The same goes for the war. The same goes for inflation. Right? So now we're starting to say, well, we need a larger story. Success is not the same as money. And that's news to many of us, because in my age, you grew up looking at success in prosperity. Right? And that's really changing very, very quickly. So basically in this world, it's a convergence of all these topics. That's why I'm talking about it. Right? It's agriculture, food, grocery shopping, retail, what we do with people, and what we do with our brand. I can guarantee you, if your brand isn't going to look to become sustainable and a green leader in the next 5 years, it will not exist in 10 years. And I don't mean that lightly. I know it's been said many times before, but why do you think companies like Shell and others are desperately looking for a way to switch? I used to work in the music business. I was a musician and producer. And in the 90s, I started doing some stuff on the internet. And one day we went to the record labels, EMI, Universal Music, and so on. And we said, music is moving to the cloud. We will have a device where all the music is just coming down from the cloud. Right? Remember Napster? Many of you may remember Napster, the software free downloading, right? So the music company said, we hate this idea. We don't like the internet because we can't control what happens. So a lot of music companies refused to go and take a look at digital business models. And you know what happened, right? Their revenues went from 45 billion selling CDs, right, to 14 billion in less than a decade. Because they couldn't see more than this, right? They were acting out of fear. Now we have the same issue, I think, when we're looking at food, agriculture, right? What exactly is happening here? It's a very similar path. And I'll put out some more details here. 3 revolutions: digital, sustainable, and the human revolution. Human revolution means that we're looking now at a different paradigm that's unfolding. You know about people, planet, profit. That's been around for 20 years. Now it's people, planet, purpose, and prosperity. Prosperity isn't the same than profit, right? Prosperity is something that's wider and potentially for everybody. I think we're seeing a future ticket emerging here that's really very different than the past. So I'll talk to you about technology. Many of you, I've observed, are working on your mobile devices, of course. And that's what we all do. But technology has grown fundamentally to this place where, like Blade Runner, right, the first Blade Runner, 1982, science fiction is becoming science fact. Right here, this device, that's my computer, that's my dating system, if I was dating, it's a bit late for me for that. But it's my bank, it's my music, it's my blog, it's everything. And very soon, it's my medical device. Right? That's what Apple is working on. So,
1 pan-fried catfish.
Let's do this again. Bring up the sound a little bit. I want to show you something that is actually science fiction still, that you may remember. 1984, Star Trek.
1 pan-fried catfish. Smells like the real thing. Well?
You remember this scene? If this machine existed, your supermarkets wouldn't be very happy. You can just tell the computer to make food, right? That is science fiction. But this one is not.
Israeli company Redefined Meat is using 3D printing to create plant-based meat. These alt steaks, as they are called, have more fiber and less fat than traditional steaks. And they have the same amount of protein, but no cholesterol. All right, where can I get one? And printing...
So I would guess in this room there aren't very many people who don't like meat, right? We're in Brazil, after all. I eat meat. I try not to eat too much. And the other day I tested meat from the laboratory that was grown in cells. Right? And I could not tell the difference between that meat that was grown from a cow in a lab than a hamburger. I'm not an expert. It wasn't a steak, it was just a hamburger. Right? So now Bill Gates and Richard Branson have invested, and of course there's a Brazilian company here, BRF, right? They have invested there as well. Bill Gates says in 10 years, this meat will cost 1/10 of regular meat, and it will give protein to pretty much anybody who needs it, solving our protein problem. Is that going to kill the meat industry? I don't think so. You know, Spotify and the cloud have not killed the music industry, it has changed it. Right? In fact, right now, if you're looking at Spotify and Apple, they're making $2 billion a month for the record companies. $2 billion a month from subscription. Right? So just like airlines will go into virtual reality, airlines will send me flying through the time tunnel in a hologram to go to a meeting. Meat companies will invest here, and grocery stores will invest in high-rises that grow vegetables. Right? And this is something that we see happening all around, this kind of dramatic change of where things are going. So here's the first lesson of the day. The future is not an extension of the present. Right? If you have been successful, that's why you're here. This arrow says, it matters, but it's probably more of an obstacle than a continuation. In fact, all of the major innovations in most industries were not made by the people in the industry. Who revolutionized the car industry? Software guys from California. Who's the founder of Spotify? 22-year-old Swedish guy, not in the music industry. So we have to look and say, okay, what does that mean? It means that you have to entertain today and run your operation and be successful and go in this direction at the same time. Right? You have to think hybridly. And I guarantee you, if you can't do that, you will keep going and going and going until your time's out, right? Nokia comes to mind. Right? Nokia said, touch phones, we don't want. We're the king of the world. It turns out people love touch phones, right? Touch screens. So really, really important. Here you see a scene from China, currently making over $3 billion a month. It's called social commerce. People selling to each other on social networks. Now I can tell you I would never do that because it would be too much for me, right? And it's a cultural question. But I can see Brazilians, young people engaging in this. Look at this chart here. Right? This is what's happening in traditional commerce worldwide, shrinking. E-commerce increasing, social commerce on top of it. That may be a little bit different in Brazil, probably is, as I've done in my research, but we can clearly see where this is going. A situation like this. Right, this is the virtual reality, the metaverse from Walmart. It's actually 4 years old, showing how people can shop with a virtual reality headset. If you ask me, I have no idea why anybody would do that. given that it's like being a fighter jet pilot and shopping, and probably make you sick. But the metaverse is one of those promises that's happening all around us. Right? And clearly that's going to be a challenge to figure out how exactly we do this. But one thing is for sure, everything that used to be not connected and not smart is becoming smart. Right? We call this the digital transformer. You stick in the old business, out comes the new business. $100 trillion value change, right? Smart home, smart city, smart transport, maybe even smart government. Who knows? There's a chance for that, right? I'm not talking about smart politicians, I'm talking about smart government. So this is the transformation that happens right now. And it happens absolutely everywhere. It's a transformation that goes across all of these things, like the car industry. Today, if you're Audi or BMW or Mercedes, you don't sell cars. Or you still try to sell a few cars, but you really are a mobility provider. The last time I spoke at the International Trade Show for Cars, they changed the name. The name is IIA, the International Automotive Industry, but now they're saying it's about mobility, right? Micromodal mobility. And the same thing is about to happen in the food industry. This one thing, right, is becoming many things. This is why collaboration is so important. For example, with technology companies. That's why understanding all of this is important, because this business hasn't really fundamentally changed. It has changed a little bit, right? But it's next on the change agenda. Right? And these mega shifts are the reason. I wrote a book about this a couple of years ago. You can download most of it for free, megashifts.digital, in Portuguese even. And it's basically all the things that are happening here, like automation, augmentation, the technology shifts happening all around us. They're coming in all at once, right? Coming at a very, very fast pace. So some examples here. I mean, basically how systems are getting smart, how you can have devices that tell you what's in the food. Right, if you want to know. They give you a smart schedule for eating your food. They even make customized food. I don't know if you heard about this. The pharma companies want to do this, right? They want to make food that is customized to my DNA. Crazy idea, right? And of course, smart systems in shops, robots doing the checking, machines ordering things, smart shopping carts. You've seen all of that. It's nothing new to you. This is an interesting one. 3D printed food. I know, it sounds crazy, right? Can you 3D print a cookie or a pizza? There's already big companies that are looking at printing ice cream on the beach. So you have a big container, right? And all the pieces of the ice cream are inside, and you get to put your name on. And you buy your ice cream printed, so to speak, manufactured on the beach. So these things are coming at a furious pace. Here's a company in Chile that does away with packaging by using a system where you can recycle and just pick up your soap. You probably heard about these projects. They're coming up everywhere to increase sustainability. So here's the thing about technology. It could be heaven or it could be hell. Right? And this is the interesting part. When I use my mobile phone all the time, yeah, maybe I get more stuff done, but did you know when you put your mobile phone on the table when you're having dinner with your family or other people, it changes the conversation without using it. Just the presence of the phone changes the conversation. And of course, you know about addiction, social media addiction. You know about how girls, when they're 14 years old, many of them are thinking about suicide because they see all these great girls on Instagram. Right? I mean, I would say that's a bit much of technology. Right? So, one thing we have to do in your business, protect humanity. Protect data, protect privacy, protect user rights, and not get carried away. I think this is a really important part, because in the end, remember what makes us buy things. Right? We don't buy things because the data is right. You didn't marry your husband or your wife because she or he is efficient. Right? I mean, to not be efficient is a problem. But our motivation isn't like this, right? It's not all just about logic. We have to think of this more holistically. Technology. The ultimate question is, why do we use it? And if the answer is, we're going to use it because it's higher margin, that's not a good answer. More value for the customer, right, result in higher margins. Different argument. We have to get away from this idea of transactions being everything. Transactions is in the end what matters to us, of course, right? But it's about experiences. That's what creates the transaction, that's what's possible, and that's what the whole discussion about purpose is all about. And you may say Brazilian consumers, because they are different than what we have in Europe, maybe they don't care so much about purpose. I think you're dead wrong on this. I mean, the previous speech showed this. People are caring about what happens in the future. And a lot of people asking this question, what kind of future do I want? And I ask myself, what kind of a future do I want for my kids? And people are asking that question. And people are asking the question, what kind of future is this company making with what they are doing? For example, Facebook. Right? Most of you are probably on Facebook. But I haven't recently met anybody that still trusts Facebook. Right? We are on it because we have to, but we don't really trust Facebook anymore. Because so many things have gone wrong. This is one example of how trust is the ultimate point. So now we're in this world, we call it nature deficit disorder. There's actually a disease with this. Right? So we're doing all these things, we're getting together like this, and we're doing what's called the sofalarity, which is staying at home, and now we're doing this. We're entering the virtual world. I think that's all very interesting, but we're forgetting something here. We're forgetting something that we have to actually attach to what makes us human. These things are tools. Imagine if a carpenter would say, my hammer is my purpose. Right? I mean, the carpenter builds a house with a hammer. His purpose is building houses, or maybe one house, or whatever it is. Right? It's not the hammer. Right? So if we want to do something that makes sense in technology, we have to think wider. Right? That brings me to the metaverse. Anybody talked about the metaverse yet? Anybody knows about the metaverse? So I'll make a brief excursion here. I've brought tonight for you my very special friend, Mark Zuck.
Let's take a look at what working in the metaverse will be like. Imagine if you could be at the office without the commute. You would still have that sense of presence, shared physical space, those chance interactions that make your day, all accessible from anywhere. Now imagine that you have your perfect work setup, and you can actually do more than you could in your regular work setup. And on top of all that...
Well, thank you, Mark. Oh, there you are. Hello. Hello, Mark. He's live now. No, actually, no, he's not. He doesn't appear to be live. But this is Mark talking about the metaverse, right? The metaverse where you go shopping, where you learn, where you live. Mark said the other day, we have to get used to the fact that in the future, we're very likely to live in a digital world. I mean, this is a far-fetched thing, right? And when you think about this, clearly, that kind of worries me. Because I believe the real world is like this. All of us love tools and technology like Zoom. But it's a convenience, it's hedonism, right? It just makes us a little bit happy. One hug is worth 1,000 Zoom calls. Okay? That doesn't mean that Zoom is bad. Zoom is great. All these things are good. But let's not forget what really matters. In your business, if you're running a supermarket, it's a lot more about hugs than it is about the Zoom technology, right? Virtual hugs or other hugs. Right? So the recipe for the future is this: awesome humans on top of amazing technology. Not awesome humans under great technology, right? Captured by great technology. So second topic is decarbonization, switching to a green economy. No, I talked about this for 20 years. Sometimes I felt like a broken record in the past talking about this. Right? But this is what's now happening. This is the number one thing that's happening in the world, the switch to renewable energy that will change every single business. And I think for the good. Not just for the good of the planet, but also for financial good. So, This fact here, you know, about 18% of our CO2 is livestock and food. And you know that people my age have been the ones who have generated 50% of CO2 in the last 25 years. Can you imagine? I mean, people my age basically are responsible for half of the world's pollution, right? In 25 years. So that's a fact here. And the other fact is, when you're looking at this statistic, beef is on the very top of that CO2 agenda. Okay. Is there ways to grow beef and to farm that could be different? Of course there are. Right? There are other pressures that don't make us go down this direction. I mentioned earlier, we're now in this kind of scenario where many of us have thought, okay, that's impossible that we're going to see more carbon taxes, but I'm here to tell you we're going to see carbon taxes on flying an airplane, mandatory, in the next few years. Every airplane ride you take, mandatory carbon tax. We're going to see a carbon tax on meat. We're going to see a carbon tax on regular cars going into cities. The City of London is considering only allowing electric cars. So what do we do with this? Well, unthinkable is the new normal. We have to think different. And I think that sometimes we're challenged or threatened by this because we prefer not to think the unthinkable, right? We want to stay comfortable. But it's good practice. You know, when I started out being a futurist, I wrote research reports. And I would sell the research report with a secure PDF for like $5,000 a piece. I sold a lot of them. One day, a customer tells me my research report is useless because IBM Watson has a real-time analytics engine that speaks to them. And Google Trends does the same that I do. Not to look at trends. It's not quite the same, so you have to shift your business model and become more unique. So you heard about these companies. This is my favorite. This is the Futuro burger here in Brazil. The Frango Futuro. Right? I know you probably heard about this, right? And this company, of course. Right? And this is statistics showing what's going to happen with meat, right? Conventional meat, vegan meat, cultured meat in a race towards the future. So if you're in this business, you're smart to diversify. 10 years ago, I had a big meeting with a German car company. I brought many other futurists. And we said the future is car sharing, electric cars, autonomous driving, right? And all of these things that we have today. And the people in the room laughed at us. Well, of course, they're Germans, right? So they said, who in their right mind would share their car, right? Share my car, that's not going to happen, right? If they had listened, maybe we would have today a different scenario to look at what the future
in
brings.
America and soon to be across the world. So we're excited to introduce Memphis Meat Chicken to the world. We've also made clean duck meat produced without the duck. With demand for meat growing so quickly, there are not enough resources to feed the planet. We need to completely change the way meat gets to the plate. We invited a taster to have the first bite.
Tastes like chicken.
Anyway, I probably shouldn't show that video to people who like real meat. But so there's a challenge. What do we do with this, right? And the other thing is, what 80% of the world's energy is derived from fossil fuel today. If that continues, your children will not be happy. I can guarantee it. At 2-degree global warming, we're going to do a lot of suffering already. 4 degrees, we're talking about 500 million climate refugees from the south, right, where it's hot, but you're kind of in that realm yourself, right? And then we have what's happening in America. All of a sudden, the American government finds $500 billion for the IRA, not the army, but the Inflation Reduction Act, right, to put into green energy, and switches around. This is what we need in Brazil. Because the Americans have realized there's more money in the new way of developing energy than there was in the old. Which is hard to believe because today, $3 billion of profit every single day comes from the oil industry, oil and gas. That is going to be tough to replace this. So as we go into this future, we're looking basically at the curve again from the beginning. So the World Economic Forum says roughly about 50 million new jobs. If you're worried about jobs in Brazil, this is where they are. Right? Climate technology, climate mitigation, climate adaptation. It's worth spending the money. So here's a lesson, the next one, big one. Green is the new digital. If you think that your store and your supermarket has to innovate by being digital, that's good. That's an ongoing thing. Right? Now the second one is you have to innovate by being green, by being sustainable at the same time. In fact, using technology can make you green by having less waste, for example, less pollution, less plastic. I mean, there's a long list of not using certain kinds of packaging, using different ways of charging and so on and so on. It's a very long story. Right? So that is really together, big blue, not IBM technology, and big green. That's a strong ticket. And it creates jobs and it creates the future. Cities are going green, right? I mean, every city, Rio de Janeiro is a great example. I don't know about Campinas, but Rio de Janeiro has a program to further greening everything. This is a clip from various countries around the world, and here is one from a city in Tokyo using futuristic technology to bring the city into the future. That's going to happen in every major city in Brazil. And this will be great because people have different expectations on what they eat and how they eat, as we heard earlier. Maybe it takes a little bit longer, right? But here we are. That is the future as we're seeing it. I mentioned earlier vertical farming. Right? Today you can have a high-rise, 10 floors with robots producing organic food for 50,000 people. The only problem is it's a little bit expensive. Right? So it's hard to afford a high-rise in every city to make your vegetables. Right? But this will be our future. Right? The combination of high-rises, vertical farming, and real farming. So if I ran a big supermarket organization, I would get into vertical farming. I'm basically branching out into the new business. Here in Matureira, right? That's what we call it. We have in Rio de Janeiro a garden, a community garden, where people are getting into urban farming, feeding 50,000 people. Is there a way that supermarkets can tap into this? There should be. Right? If it can be done in Rio de Janeiro in the favela, right? Can it be done other places? Absolutely. Right? Wall Street Journal has a great article about this. So, number 3 is reformation. Changing why and how we do things. You could say in many ways that the economic logic that we've had until now is breaking. That's because we've reached the top of this possibility there. So what we're looking at is this reformation, basically saying, okay, people around the world are talking about different logic. Right? This logic is essentially the flip side of profit and growth. People, planet, and purpose. Oops, sorry, you should stay there. A little bit earlier for this. This is what happens when you have a fast clicker. Don't use a fast clicker. So basically, this is the new paradigm unfolding. And the stock market is already reacting. So I want to play you a short clip from my movie, The Good Future Explained. This one actually has Portuguese subtitles. I'm speaking in English, but it's in Portuguese in the video. Just a couple seconds of this one. Reformation is to redo something that's no longer working and to start again and to reorganize, to reset. Again, the World Economic Forum calls this the Great Reset, which is a little bit probably overambitious in many ways, but I prefer to call it the Great Transformation or the Great Reformation, which is kind of like going back to Italy and the Renaissance, and maybe Martin Luther, talks about reforming church and reforming society and resetting how we think of the world. The biggest issue we're having right now is that technology is capable of doing all these things, but we haven't actually done this because we are pursuing an old-fashioned approach to our society, the approach of extreme capitalism. Whatever makes money is fine. Whatever gets us there is fine, as long as it produces money. We focus on GDP. Now, make no mistake about this. This is not a political question. right? This is a recipe for our survival. Right? And we're talking about a different logic. This logic of the old days, right? Banks, oil companies, working alone, essentially in what's called an ecosystem, right? By themselves. And it worked because there was so much room. And now we're switching to a new logic. That's the ecosystem, right? I heard the word ecosystem today like 50 times already, right? And I mean creating businesses that connect, that take care of these 4 points, that tick the box of people, planet, purpose, and prosperity. That's the ticket. Now, many people are saying, it's going to be too expensive to do these things. How much more expensive would it be if people hate you in 10 years for what you haven't done? Right? Just ask you all in 10 years which way we're going with this. So basically we're shifting in the system. Here you see sort of the ego economy, right? Oil and gas, and that worked for a while, but now we're here. Right? Nobody in their right mind would look at this and say, oh, that's not going to work. And every success story is here, right, in ecology. So what does it mean for grocery shopping? For the shopping cart? You have to go beyond the transaction. You're always going to want a transaction. That's, of course, in the end what people do, hopefully. Right? But you create other values. Just like I will not buy certain clothes because I don't like fast fashion. I don't want to support people being exploited for making T-shirts in Bangladesh. And believe it or not, people are starting to care. This is something that we see pretty much around the world. So here's your country digitized. And really what's happening here is quite simple. As Brazil goes digital, which it is, fast. It seems slow sometimes when you're looking from the inside. Right? But basically what's happening is digitization is absolutely everywhere. You can see it. It will be your story, your people, your purpose, and your experiences that differentiates you, not your tech and not your products. The products are part of it, of course. But what makes Tesla the leading car company in the world? Right? Actually 3 or 4 times the market value of Mercedes-Benz and Audi combined. It's a bad car, right? I don't know if you've ever driven a Tesla. I don't like the Tesla. I like my BMW. But nevertheless, right, it's the experience, right? It's the story, the brand that people believe in. It's going to be hard for BMW to make a story like this, right? Because they're Germans, the story making is difficult for us. We make products, we don't make stories. Americans make stories. Brazilians make stories, right? Brazilians are also good story makers. So, what's really important here is to create experiences. Right? And this chart is actually 25 years old from a book called The Experience Economy. The guy was very early writing it, right? But this is the future. Make goods, deliver services, stage experiences. If you can stage an experience in your shop, no matter how big or small it is, you win. Especially when it's omni-channel. It's not easy, right? I'll give you some examples what happens here, right? With this Nike, right? Have you been to a Nike store? You can actually play baseball in a Nike store in New York, right? You can go there to meet a star, right? You can actually have your shoe made on demand, right? Yeah, it's not food, so it's a little bit easier for them, right? But this is what the Nike store does. We have to learn how to take a wider view. So if you're like this in the future, you focus. Focus is good, we need that, right? But let's take a wider view too. What could the future be apart from what I do now? If you don't have an answer, what will your company do in 5 years? Or what will I do in 5 years? You are in deep trouble. Because 5 years are 1 year. And that's how fast we're moving into this future. So let's talk about what happens to humans. Yeah. We have artificial intelligence and thinking machines everywhere. Right? Kind of. But are they really smart?
Meet DALL-E. DALL-E is an open AI which generates images using 100% artificial intelligence. So what does that mean? It means that every image you are currently seeing did not exist prior to when they were generated.
So here's an AI that makes pictures and makes your designer unemployed. This cover of Cosmopolitan magazine was made by an artificial intelligence in 12 seconds, and it didn't get paid. Right? I don't know if you like the cover or not, but it's hard to say, from a human standpoint. And here's a guy who made a picture with an artificial intelligence, this guy Jason Allen, right? And it won an art competition. This picture was made by a robot, essentially, and he won an art competition. They didn't know it was a machine until he got the prize. Right? But here's the thing about smart machines. The guy who runs DeepMind says artificial intelligence means turning data and information into knowledge. That's his definition. Right? Think about that for a second. Isn't that what we have? I mean, you're sitting here saying, I have a lot of knowledge, right? And that's why I am successful. But here's the pushback on this, of course. Knowledge without wisdom is useless. That's a Zen Buddhist saying. Second part of that is wisdom without consciousness is also useless. In other words, machines can have a lot of knowledge about everything, but they don't know how it all goes together. They don't have what comes easy to us: imagination, intuition. Jeff Bezos, probably the most successful businessman in the world for a long time, he said the other day, I look at facts and focus groups when I do things. In the end, I decide with my intuition. Right? That is so important that we keep this. Right? We're going into this world where machines are binary, machines have number information, but humans have 10 different kinds of intelligence. Kinesthetic, social. That's why I think in the future our jobs are there. They're not to compete with the super brain, right, with the exponential things that happen. They're not compete with these machines. These machines are stupid. They do a job. They're as dumb as a toaster. Right? They do a good job. They do the routine. Right? This machine is trying to be more human. We have a lot of those too. This machine is trying to be very human by having facial expression. Right? This machine is dancing. It's a robot from Boston Dynamics. It's 800 kilos. Right? If you tried this 10 years ago, it would break down the entire building just trying to dance. Right? And now we have these robots that can easily do this. And here's Mick Jagger and his robot making a copy of Mick Jagger, but bad copy, obviously. I'd love to play the song, but if I played the song, YouTube would kick me off eventually. When you play Start Me Up, that's what the song is. So here's the reality. These will be everywhere. But they're not going to be a threat for us. They're going to be fancy tools. We could probably make them better than fancy tools, but we probably shouldn't. I think artificial intelligence should just get the job done, right? It's about competence, not consciousness. Why would we want those machines to be conscious? So this fear that many of us have, we become useless because machines are smart. I think there is a little reason for this, but not much. Because the opposite is also true, right? As we're moving into this, anything that cannot be digitized becomes really valuable. That is why you're here, right? Contacts, relationships, engagement, understanding, foresight, intuition, imagination, creativity, design, negotiation. Hard to do for a machine. So this is where we're going. If you have kids, this is what you want them to learn. I mean, you want to learn that yourself, right? These are things that machines can't do. Mystery, values, consciousness. And guess what? This matters a lot when you think about the future. Because we're going to have to be creative. We're going to have to think wider and larger about this. This is the pyramid of work of the future. Now, if you look at this kind of Maslow pyramid, right, you can safely say the lower part here, that's machine territory. Right? Machines can have logic. They can know all the data. IBM Watson can read Wikipedia in 1 minute and remember all of it. I wish I could do that. Right? We're not going to beat the machines by knowing more. Right? But up here, deeper knowledge, tacit knowledge, understanding, purpose, right? That's human turf. And you will do great in your business if you focus on that and let the other stuff be done by machines, as long as it doesn't disturb us. Right? So this is why we need to teach our kids personality, character, mindset, values, not just knowledge. Right? I mean, knowledge is good. I'd love to have more knowledge. Yeah? Einstein said, imagination is more important than knowledge. I can guarantee you when it's about the future of supermarkets and your job, it's going to be primarily about imagination. Take in all the knowledge you have, turn that information. That's also why rehumanizing our business is important. Not dehumanizing. I would be all for taking away people at the checkout, but I want to put them to work somewhere else. Right? I think that is an important path of the future, which way we're going with this. Right? Because basically, computers will do all the routine. They will drive, they will fly, they'll fix my teeth. Right? Computers will do all of that. But this, here's a key message, another key message for tonight. If you work like a robot will take your job. Okay, many of us kind of work like robots, a little bit. So the machines will take that part of our job. That's not going to kill our job. If I'm 100% routine welding in a car, in a factory, yeah, the machine will take my job. Here's a second message, not on here. If you learn like a robot, downloading information, you will end up working for the robot. Because you haven't learned how to think yourself. Right? This is really why we have to change education. So, the future is a mindset. The future is not about tomorrow. The future isn't about prediction. The future is how we look at it. Great saying by American futurist Barbara Hubbard, as you see the future, so you act. As you act, so you become. You see the future being bad? You have fears about the future? You're creating that future. And this is really interesting, of course, self-fulfilling prophecy, nothing new. But we're going into a warp drive now. Right? Imagine what I showed in the beginning. We don't have time to sit back and cultivate our fear. Right? We have to take a wider look and say, what is the future mindset really is? Having ears, understanding. And I wish for you to come out from the session and say, I'm going to start working on my ears. You can buy them on Amazon. No, just kidding. You have to grow them. Right? You have to develop them. So this is the most important part, 3 principles. The principles of technology. Exponential, convergent industries, combinatorial products. If you're in the supermarket business, you're going to get into farming, you're going to get into distribution, you're going to get into technology. That's what this says. Right? This one is about what happens with us. Holistic business models, circular, sustainable, human purpose. You should invest equally here, then you invest here. Or the other way around, rather. Do not think for a minute that technology will save you. It will not. It will just commoditize you. Technology is a tool. We have a larger story that will potentially be what saves us from a future that doesn't exist anymore. So Mark Benioff from Salesforce said something very smart. What we have to do is to get to the future ahead of our customers and be ready to say hello when they finally arrive. You in a supermarket have to actually build the supermarket of the future, just like Jeff Bezos built the Amazon Kindle. You may remember the e-reader, right? The Kindle sells 7 times as many books as any real book sells in print already. And he owns publishing, right? Direct publishing. So we have to get to the future before our people are saying, you know, you can have the following app or whatever it is, right? Just 1 or 2 steps, not 10 before this. Final message also on this. Our future, our destination, Henry Miller, one of my favorite authors, says it's a new way of seeing things. It's not a destination. I don't know if you've ever been to therapy with your husband or your wife, but this is the purpose of therapy, right? You come out and you hate each other, that's one option. You come out and say, I have found a new way of seeing things. I see something, right? And that's really what we need in business. The car companies, right? This is called gasoline thinking. You know, you have a car, you put gas, you drive, you make noise. Right? The new companies don't have gasoline thinking. Right? Whether the German companies will survive this, I don't know. Right? But it may very well kill them. Or take a good snap out of their innovation. Right? So, Brazil 2050, estimates say Brazil will be the 4th largest economy in the world. You've heard that before. And GDP is exploding. This is the latest research on Brazil. Many of you will say, oh my God, you know, this is like, yeah, we've heard this before, depending on who wins the election or whatever you think. But this is a great point about the future. A great point about Brazil. So I'm going to summarize and then we'll take some questions. First, the future is better than we think. Right? O futuro é melhor do que você imagina. Just in case you couldn't read. Right? Anyway, that's important. Because when we believe that the future is good, we can be more optimistic. Many people say the future is won by optimists. You're not going to win by being a pessimist. You lose. You always lose being a pessimist. It doesn't mean you have to be stupid or naive, right? But optimism is something that we decide. Cristiano Figueiredo, who is a climate change negotiator at the Paris Agreement, she says it's about stubborn optimism. Right? Another great saying is that we have to have pessimism of the intellect, the thinking, but optimism of the will, to think about the future. The next thing is, what I said earlier, look at this paradigm. This is the ticket, right? Digitize, decarbonize, and reform. Together. You fail on decarbonization, you will regret it. This is the ticket. It's painful. It will cost money, but that's the ticket. Right? Third one is the new agenda. This is millennials, you know, people between 25 and 40. This is what they care for. They want to see a future that's holistic, not a future that's just rich. I mean, what is a rich future going to help us when the world is falling apart? Right? I mean, that's kind of a strange argument, right? Lastly, whatever you invent, put the human inside. Right? Put the human in the loop. It's called HITL, right? Don't take the human out. Only take the human out if it's utterly possible and nobody cares, like welding a car. Right? Put the human inside. If you take away the cash register for a machine, you put those people to work making recipes for the customers, like many people have chosen to do. Finally, our world is going forward is based on ecosystems, not ecosystem. That's why you're here. We heard earlier the announcements about the bank, if I got this right. It's going to be important for that to be an open ecosystem. Open ecosystem. That is the ticket to the future. Everybody who has strong ecosystems wins. There are some ecosystems like Apple who are also winning. You know, it's kind of an interesting parallel. Bates discussion, right? But basically that is the recipe for the future. I'm going to publish the PDF so you can share it. I will send it to the organizers. So I want to say muito obrigado. Thanks for your time. And let's have some questions. Now wait. Okay. Sure.
Gerd Leonhard, thank you very much for being here with us. It was a pleasure. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bom, muito obrigada, gente. Vamos aplaudir o Gerd mais uma vez por essa apresentação incrível. Infelizmente, por causa do nosso tempo, nós não conseguiremos fazer perguntas. Expliquei para o Gerd, mas com certeza sairemos daqui com muito mais conhecimento e melhores do que quando chegamos, não é mesmo? Então, foi uma palestra incrível. Nós já estamos chegando aqui ao final da nossa programação. Lembrando que na mesa de vocês existe o QR Code para a pesquisa de satisfação. Não deixem, por favor, de participar, porque é através dessa avaliação que nós poderemos nos aperfeiçoar para as próximas edições, sempre buscando a melhor experiência para todos vocês que vivem a convenção ABRAS. Então participem e façam a sua avaliação.